The Million March for Children was just last month, and there was a big showing all the way across Canada. I went to the Vancouver one. You guys all saw that footage there. This is some images of what took place in Victoria. And while some of the counter-protesters got out of hand, and while it kind of put an end to the event. And today, I have someone to talk about this that actually was there. Michael, thanks for joining me today. You were at this event in Victoria. Now, this took place in, I believe it was 78 cities across Canada, and you were at the event. What caused you to want to go to this event in the first place?
Well, I kind of know what side of the issue that I'm on when I hear about these things going on with kids. I'm not a father. I'm not married, but I still am this is part of my neighborhood, and if I ever did have kids, I wouldn't want them to have to deal with this kind of thing if it was at all possible to get the government to stop inserting itself in the lives of kids when it should be the parents taking care of them.
Well, thanks for joining me today as well to talk about your experience at this big protest. Now, across Canada, of course, there was lots and lots of support, and you happen to live in probably one of the wokest places in our entire nation. That's kind of where we're at with this. But tell us about your experience. How was it when you showed up? We know that there was big organization for counter protesters. The unions got involved for this, but what was the showing like when you first got there?
Well, when I first got there, the police were there. There was a section cordoned off for where the stage was, and as I arrived, it was just after 12:30, which is when the speakers were going to start speaking. Mm-hmm. By the time I arrived, they were already being shouted down, and the organizers, I found out later on watching Twitter videos that some of the police actually wanted to shut down the speeches. So the organizers made a quick exit, escorted by the police. And it left the rest of us, which were in the hundreds at that point, kind of milling around together. There was no real separation at that point between, let's say, trans protesters and the parents. There was some, but everyone was kind of mingling. There were some conversations happening. It didn't seem all that violent or anything like that. And I heard from somebody that just as I arrived, that's when that guy was taken down, or whoever that person was, that had rushed the stage, taken the mic over, and then the police wrestled that person to the ground and took them away. I just missed it by just maybe 5 minutes. So by the time I arrived, everybody was just kind of hanging out.
So explain this picture here. This is a picture you took. So you're not in the picture. You're obviously behind the camera here. But explain what's happening in this image.
Okay, so this was almost at the very end. I didn't take too many photographs. I was just busy milling around and meeting great people, actually, just talking to the parents and just sort of seeing what the event was going to be all about. This picture here, like I said, is toward the end. Mm-hmm. We were completely encircled by the crowd. So this was a slow process that happened over a period of about 3.5 hours that I was there.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so this is very, very close to the end when I decided to leave. But at this point, we were probably outnumbered 10-1. I mean, this picture here, there's about a dozen of us left. Mm-hmm. And everybody outside of the police that you see there were counter protesters. They had hemmed us in really, really quite badly. And the police were doing their job, but they kept backing up, sort of creating a smaller and smaller circle around us. And I don't blame the police. They did their job. They took care of us and protected us. But we were kind of backed into a corner. And by that time, like I said, there was just maybe a dozen of us left, and we were just being screamed at by the crowd at that point.
Right. And I had a similar experience when I was in Vancouver. It was way before the march even took place. There was only maybe a dozen or so people at the event. And then there was a bunch of counter protesters who came, and they were being very aggressive. pushing their way and on these people and getting, because they were all just sitting down, and they get them to come up and push them into occupying the space that they were occupying. What ended up happening though is the march was actually later in Vancouver, and then all the people showed up for the march, and then that was pretty great. I mean, and people have seen the footage on the channel here of what that looked like. Also Lauren Southern's channel, and also Dan Dix's channel, Press for Truth. All great coverage there, not what the mainstream media was trying to tell us about what actually happened at that event. But so your experience is that, you know, they kind of pushed in on you. Was there any real violence, or was it just like aggressive people and then everybody kind of, okay, time to go?
Yeah, well, like I said, it started out where everybody was milling around. There was no real lines, you could say. And then there was some chanting and some counter chanting. And, but like I said, as time went on, I heard later, busloads of, I mean, they must have emptied University of Victoria, and all the student protesters started showing up. They were very, very much more aggressive. They weren't pushing against the police. They were very smart not to do that, obviously. They didn't want to get themselves in any trouble, but they had no problem sort of really, really being insulting and screaming at us and just pushing their way through. There was one incident where a 90-year-old gentleman was standing with his family, and a very young girl was holding a sign next to him, maybe one of his grandkids or great-grandkids. He's 90 years old, I heard. And there was a protester that just came barreling through and tried to kick the sign away, actually knocked the old man over. The gentleman, he fell, and he was okay. He's a tough old guy. but then the little girl was almost stepped on, and so yeah, that was really the only thing that I saw personally that was physically aggressive. But they definitely were screaming at us. They really were upset. The fewer of us that there became, the more upset that they were there, that we were still there. Like we were kind of, you know, how dare we stand as they're advancing on us, that kind of thing. And they were telling us to go home, get out of here. Why are you still here? There was even one guy that said that, he says, this is such a waste of taxpayer money. I guess talking about the police having to be there to protect us. I don't know, you know, since when do they care about taxpayer money? But
or police, or police,
right? Yeah.
Right. A little ironic. I guess, yeah, irony is not their strongest suit. Now, explain this this last picture that you provided for me here. Is a woman here standing by herself, holding a sign saying they are not your children, for people that are just listening with audio.
Yeah, so this girl, she might have been about 16, 17, something like that. I took that picture, and some other people took pictures of her too, just because she was so defiant. This was when just before I left, and just actually before the police shut down the protest altogether. They gave us 5 more minutes, and then they were going to shut down and sort of escort us all out. But I looked at this girl, and you know, she's like, to me, she's like the face of that protest. Mm-hmm. She was just, if you look at the look in her face, she's just defiant. She's holding her sign high, and people are, you can't see it obviously because it's only a photograph, but people were screaming at her. They weren't very far away from her. I mean, at this point, we were hemmed in so much that if I reached out, I was, you know, reaching police, and then one person beyond the police were the screaming protesters. And like I said, they had completely surrounded us by that point, and there were about 5 rows deep on behind us, and hundreds out in front of us, facing the legislative building there.
So as this is, I mean, that's quite a traumatic experience to be there, and you know, and have so much opposition against you as well. But as we saw, as it unfolded across Canada, it was largely a successful protest. It garnered the attention of media all over the place. Obviously, media trying to spin it in the image that they wanted to portray rather than what actually went down. But it was largely a successful and peaceful protest that took place, this march for children, largely, people from all walks of life that came out to this. Now, news is breaking now that there is going to be another march. They're going to be marching again. This is, I don't know if you heard this. Maybe I'm breaking this news to you now. But hands off our kids. You can go to the website handsofourkids.ca, who organized the original one on September 20th. That was a Wednesday. Is now organizing one for October 21st, 2023, which will be a Saturday, which will actually make it more available for more people. People like yourself probably either took the day off work or had the day off, or I believe you work for yourself, so you could take your day off quite easily. Not everyone could do that on the original one, but now they're organizing one where maybe more people will be able to be in attendance, not just professional protesters at that point. Is this something that you'd actually be interested in revisiting again, or is this something that's kind of turned you off from the whole protest circuit?
No, this was my first ever thing like that. I'd never ever gone to anything like this before, but I knew why I was there. They're not going to run us off, Clyde. That's all I got to say about that. They're not going to run us off. People that want to take advantage of kids, they're not going to win this battle, because those parents are not going to allow it to happen. Like I said, it was peaceful, but the march didn't even get to happen, Clyde. They ran off the speakers. Nobody got to speak, and the march stopped, and everybody stayed, hundreds of us. And we just said, well, we're here already. People had taken the day off of work in a time when, cost of living makes it very difficult for people to make a living and to feed their families. So they weren't going to just walk away. They were there to make a point, and they made their point. They made it sometimes with chanting and sometimes with conversations. I did see some conversations happening. And actually, towards the end of the march, when we were escorted out, every time a group of us were escorted out, they would boo. They would chant and boo at us and tell us to get away. And as we were leaving, a group of people that I was with, we just turned around and took a big bow. And I shouted, "Thanks for coming."
Oh, that's great. That's great. Kill them with kindness. Absolutely. Just don't react with the vitriol that they're throwing at you. I definitely encourage that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and just to round it off, there was one guy there. He said, "Look, I'm a gay man," and he came up to us and shook our hands and said, "I'm so sorry that you guys had to go through that." He says, "I'm a gay man. I don't agree with this. I'm sorry that it's happening, and thank you for being here and standing up for something like this, for standing up for what's right for kids." So even from different diverse communities, we can see that people are not all in favor of this kind of thing happening to kids.
Well, and I think that's the theme that's coming out. I know that the media is trying to portray this as people who are homophobic or things like that. This is largely a group of people who say, if that's your walk of life, that's fine. There's no problem. There's no contesting that. We're in a situation where adult teachers want to talk about sexuality in secret to to these teachers without the parents knowing about it. And this is where we have to draw the line. It's not okay. It's never okay to have secrets from parents with young children. And I think everybody can get on board with that. And as long as we send that message loud and clear that that's what we're standing for, and everybody's welcome to these events, that's the right shoe to be wearing, I think, is the analogy there.
I think that the trans community that was there, the problem was I think a lot of them made it about them. They took it very personally. I mean, I looked out over those sea of faces, screaming and yelling at us, and I thought to myself, these are hurt people. A lot of these people they're not evil. They're just not, I don't know. I just felt sorry for some of them. Like when I looked over, they were screaming. I could see that they were just really, they were hurting people. So hurting themselves. I mean, they themselves were hurting. And sometimes when people are hurting like that, they don't see the issue for what it is, and they want to vent out, and they vent their anger out onto people that would listen to them if they gave them half a chance to listen to them. and really hear what they had to say. But yeah, like you said, there's some lines that are just not going to be crossed, especially for parents. But I saw a lot of single people there too, people without kids. So there was lots of support from the community as a whole, and I'm looking forward to this one. Maybe I'll meet some of the friends that I met there the last time.
Oh, that's amazing, and I hope we all meet new friends. This is a great opportunity to go out and meet new people that share, have common interests in life. And Michael, I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Clyde. As always, it's a pleasure. Absolutely.